Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jalen and today I'm doing the classic mid-year book Freakout tag.
Hello everyone, this is post-film editing Jalen. I recognize that the audio in this video is garbage mama. It is rotted, it is gutted, but if you've been following my channel, I've had some technical difficulties lately with my new equipment and my new setup. I am figuring it out and I will have it figured out by the next video because I cannot do this anymore. So bear with me, I apologize. I just cannot be asked to refilm again like I did with my last video. It's too much. This is a booktube account. This is not Paramount Pictures, honey. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you stick around despite the audio being trash.
As always, before we get into the video, I will share what I'm drinking today. I'm sipping on this sour beer. It's called Rowley Farmhouse Ales Meyer Lemon Goza. There she is. It's 5%. They're based out of New Mexico. I didn't get the reaction of sipping this, but this shit is sour. Oh my god, it's sour. Sour, sour, sour. I mean, what did I expect going into a sour? But true to its name, sour. By Olivia Rodrigo. We stand. It feels like forever and a day ago since I did this the last time, which was last year, of course. But I think this is a fun tag. I know like everyone does it, but I think it is a really good like reflection tag. Hitting the mid-year mark, I definitely want to follow this up with like a top 10 books of the year so far that I did last year as well. Those are always fun to do and reflect on the reading I've done so far. So, before we get into the video, by the way, I went viral on TikTok yesterday and I'm scared. Do I need security? Never had this happen to me before and I'm scared. Made a TikTok about 3 disturbing books that I recommend to people and it has almost 300,000 views. Now I have a little bit over 4,000 followers, which I mean, it's not like that much in the grand scheme of things, but it seems like the kids on TikTok really like the horror, scary stuff. That's been a fun little side project. CJ from CJ Reads convinced me to do that. So if you like TikTok, I am on Book Talk, which I never thought would happen, but going well, I guess. Let's get into the tag questions. Question number 1, best book you've read so far in 2021. And I have 2 for this. A lot of these questions I'm gonna have 2 answers just because these books are so different in my mind, but I like them both for like very different reasons. And so I had to put them both in here. First up, I have George Saunders' A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. I have talked about this book a lot on my channel, but if you're new here, or if you want to hear me rave about this some more, here you go. This is a short story and essay collection from Saunders. So he collects 7 short stories from 4 very prolific Russian writers. And so we get Anton Chekhov, Leo Tolstoy, Gogol, I forget his first name, and then Turgenev. So what he does is he gives you a short story and then George Saunders reflects on, his background as a creative writing professor, like why he thinks these stories work so well and what he teaches his students to use in their own short story craft. And so this book is a treasure chest of insights for both readers and writers alike. I am not a writer myself, but as a reader, I find that I'm so much more critical when I'm reading short stories in particular now after reading this collection. He looks at different techniques that these writers use, primarily in the form of escalation. So he makes the case that escalation is a key component of short story writing and always upping the ante for the reader to keep them engaged. And so he asks you, the reader, what you're liking about stories, what you're not, when you start to get bored or when you don't, and identifying those things so that when you're reading or writing a story, you can kind of parse through those feelings, especially when a story is not fitting in a framework that typically you're familiar with, I guess. So like there's one story in here called The Singers, which uses this kind of like unconventional structure, and he finds that some of his students are very displeased with the story, and he kind of asks the reader, like, did you feel the same thing? And why? And then he kind of goes on this beautiful essay about why he thinks the story is so good, and kind of an underpinning here that shows how much George Saunders is like in complete joy writing this book is George Saunders discusses these kind of like big philosophical questions about like life, that he thinks that these Russian story writers are what makes these Russian stories so timeless, and like a goal that he has for his own writing and that he kind of puts on his students as to like why certain stories become prolific and why certain ones don't. I found this to be a really inspirational book as well. It made me want to try writing because he basically says like you don't need to have any like set ideas before going into writing a story. You just kind of have to start somewhere and then think about where you want those things to go and question what you're doing, question how you're going to escalate the story, and then see where it goes from there. And he also makes the case for revision, of course, as well. You're not going to get the story right in the first try. So long story short, I think if you like Russian literature, if you like literary criticism, if you just like short stories, if you like reading, I think this is an incredible book. I underlined so many passages in here, and it's just so smart and so joyfully written. It feels like you're just kind of chatting with a friend about books, which is the best feeling ever. So Highly recommend this one. As you may know, I read primarily fiction, and so I had to put a novel for like my favorite novel so far this year. And I think I've come down to Fake Accounts by Lauren Euler. Love the ring light glare. It very much reflects what's going on in this book. I found this to be a very divisive read, and it makes sense why it is. I think this is one of the most intelligent, funny, timely, and just like critical books that I've read this year or ever. Lauren Euler, I think, is a mad genius. Before she wrote this novel, she has been known as this very incisive critic. She will go in on a book if she wants to. And so it's always entertaining to read her reviews when it comes out. She reviews mostly literature, so fiction. And so I love seeing her perspective. I love reading her thoughts. I think her brain is just like, big brain energy to the fullest with this book and all of her writing. She had a recent essay about trolling that I thought was so brilliant. I'll link it below for anyone interested in her style. But Lauren Euler is very interested in the internet and social media, and it's hard to sell this book because it's doing so many things at once. It's not just a novel about like the internet. I think it's about so much more than that. I think first and foremost, this is a novel about the internet and the ways that it plays into our everyday lives. And this is not just like a dissection of the internet and saying how bad phones are for our brains or how bad social media is. It's more so looking at the ways that we create personas and facades in our everyday lives and how social media and the internet kind of exacerbates that natural instinct to kind of put on a front for others or for oneself. And so this book, we follow a narrator who is in a relationship, and one day she discovers by looking through her boyfriend's phone that he is a secret right-wing online conspiracy theorist, and he's never told her about. And so from there, she plans to break up with him because he's been keeping all these secrets from her, and she obviously doesn't agree with the views that he espouses online. However, something happens from there, which I don't want to spoil, and then she goes to Berlin, in which she starts putting on these different personas based on astrological signs and goes on dates with many people. So this book is an interesting look at the ways we create personhoods and what that means. This book operates almost as a form or a piece of criticism. I think it's so smart in what it's saying about our modern time, and I think it is doing it in such an excellently like satirical way here. Definitely feels like Lauren Euler is kind of smirking at the reader when she's writing this. While this book does function like a piece of criticism, it does still have a novelistic sense of pace. I think there's a lot of, twists in here that I was not expecting, and it was really entertaining to read. But overall, I think the writing here is what's the standout for me, and just the critical social commentary that Lauren Euler is so good at dissecting, and her criticism is so well reflected in a novel. And it was just so fun reading a novel from someone that is so critical about the form, and you can tell she really loves novels, but she often finds that they're bad, which makes sense. And so I think ever since reading this book, I've become more critical of novels that I'm reading. In here, there's one point where she starts using fragmentary style to kind of critique the modern use of fragments in literature. So I like that she's playing with the form and doing something new with the novel. It's so fun to read and exciting and different from whatever I've read before. So, and I've also been watching like a ton of her Zoom events with a bunch of authors. It's been really fun to watch those and kind of engage with someone that's big brained. So go into it expecting less of like a story about conspiracy theorists and more so a dissection of our present moment. I loved it. All right, question number 2. Best sequel you've read so far in 2021. I am not one to read many series. I don't think I've read any sequels this year, I'm pretty sure. However, I will twist this question and basically say what's my favorite sophomore novel that I've read. And for this one, I have to say Brandon Taylor's newest collection that's out this month on the 22nd. Yeah, Filthy Animals by Brandon Taylor. I was so excited for this book. Last year, Real Life by Brandon Taylor was my favorite book of the year. This short story collection was equally incredible. I am so glad we got a story collection from Brandon Taylor as his follow-up, because I found it so awesome to kind of get his insights into more topics and getting just more Brandon Taylor aside from the one narrative that he told in real life. And so this is a collection of mostly interconnected stories following this kind of complex love triangle of sorts between this guy, and he meets this couple at this party, engage in this love triangle of sorts as that couple is open. You also get some standalone stories that are also brilliant, but they're all kind of underpinned by this theme of longing and yearning for more and trying to find a sense of place and home, typically in others. So these are really interesting stories looking at interpersonal relationships that are often very fraught, both sexual, familial, all these relationships that are considered. I just think it's such a brilliant character study throughout, and I really liked reading a collection of interconnected stories. I tend to read story collections that are all just individual stories, but this is a really good one. The writing is so evocative, cinematic. You feel like you're very much in the head of these characters, even though it's told in a third-person perspective. I just really like the way Brandon Taylor writes. He can write a gorgeous sentence. He's incredibly funny on Twitter, and just such one of the most brilliant minds, I think, working right now. He's just so good at what he's doing, and he's so well read and cares so much about fiction. I don't know. I think he's awesome. So definitely check that out. Question number 3, new release you haven't read yet but want to. So for this one, I have this beast of a book called Let the Record Show by Sarah Schulman. This is basically a historical record of the ACT UP movement in New York in the late 80s and early 90s and the way that they tackled the AIDS crisis. Sarah Schulman, she did over 100 interviews, I believe, to basically create this history in which she was also engaged with ACT UP during this time. And this is supposed to be just one of the most amazing books, I guess, ever on how to start a movement, and plan on starting this month. I know I'm like in the middle of Pride Month right now, but I really want to read this because I've seen so much hype for it, and I just want to learn more about this time period that I haven't really read too much about. So definitely check this out if you want to read more about this. Beastie nonfiction book is not my usual thing, but I think this is so important and something I'm really intrigued by. So keep an eye out for thoughts on this one from me. Question number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. There's only one answer for this. I haven't been watching too many of these videos yet, so I'm sure everyone's saying the same thing. I'm going to guess. But the new Sally Rooney novel, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I cannot wait for this book. I have been trying to manifest a galley for weeks now. I haven't seen too many out in the wild. I've seen like on Instagram, some people have been posting about them, but it's mostly like critics that I've seen have an early copy. But I'm hoping I can get one somehow, but maybe not. Even if I have to wait till September, that is fine. But I'm so excited for it. I love Normal People and Conversations with Friends and Mr. Salary. I'm obsessed with Sally Rooney. She is one of the reasons why I got really back into reading again. So I'm excited to see where she goes next. I would also like to reread probably Normal People before it comes out, just because it's been a while since I've read Rooney, and I kind of want to dive back into it and see kind of what I think now that it's been like almost 2 years since I read it. So Rooney Tunes will be eating this year. Question number 5, biggest disappointment. I haven't been reading too many bad books this year, which is awesome. I'll say one book that really did disappoint me was Department of Speculation by Jenny Awful. I did not like this book. I see this book praised a lot from literary fiction reviewers. Awful is very highly praised. This was in like the top 10 of the year for the New York Times list that they put out every year. I mean, she's very widely regarded as an amazing writer. I just did not vibe with the fragmentary style here. I barely remember this book now, but it's basically about a failing marriage. And while I do think there are often times when fragmentary style really works for me, there's a book coming up on my list that really works so well using this style. I think sometimes it can lend itself to just hollowness in the narrative. I did not feel more connected to these characters through the use of fragmentary style. I felt like it was kind of all over the place, and I know that's kind of inherent in having a fragmentary story in terms of putting the pieces together yourself, but it just felt mostly pretentious to me, and it didn't really serve the story overall. I got what the novel was saying, and then it was over, and didn't really, there was just nothing for me to hold on to after I finished it. I don't know. So yeah, that one I did not love, but that was like one of the few books I did not like this year so far, but it was super short, so that's good. Question number 6, biggest surprise. For this one, I will have to say a book I recently read called The Employees by Olga Ravin has been the biggest surprise for me, just because I don't usually read like sci-fi-ish novels, really. This is a novel looking at a workplace aboard a spacecraft in the 2100s, and it's told in a collection of statements. There's this committee taking statements from the humans and humanoid AI robots that work on the ship. After there's some object that they found like on a planet or something, they bring them onto the ship and they start affecting the humans and the robots. And so the committee is basically taking a bunch of statements from these employees and seeing kind of what the effects are on them and investigating what's going on. And so I think this book is a insanely intelligent novel about the workplace, about capitalism, about longing in those settings, and I think it does it in a way that's not really, heavy-handed at all. It's really smart in the terms of using statements of varying lengths. So like some statements are one sentence, some are like 2 pages. You don't often know whether the person speaking is a human or a robot, and so it blurs the distinction there to such a brilliant effect and makes you question, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to operate in a workplace setting or in capitalism generally, and what that looks like when it goes to the furthest extent that you can really imagine. I think this book is incredible. If you like any of the things that I just mentioned, you definitely have to pick it up. I think the plot is so good, and I really like the way it ended. I think it has a really great ending as well. Really good payoff there. So love that book. Question number 7, favorite new author, debut, or new to you? For this one, I think I'll go with Melissa Broder, who wrote Milk Fed that came out this year in February. Last year, I read So Sad Today, so I guess this is not the perfect answer for this question, but I will say this is the first novel that I read by Melissa Broder. I also now listen to her podcast, which I love, and I just think she's brilliant and so funny. She writes about, very dark subjects such as depression, eating disorders, most notably in this novel, but she does it in such a darkly comedic way, and often a really beautiful way, and I just really appreciate her mind. I think she uses comedy to a brilliant effect, both in every instance in where I consume her work, whether that be in a novel, whether in essays, whether in the podcast. I think she's just so smart. This book really hit me emotionally. This basically follows this woman who has a very severe eating disorder, and she really falls in love with this woman that works at her local froyo shop. It kind of goes from there, and you kind of see her find herself through this relationship. And I just could not put this book down. It's told in really short chapters, so it was really easy to fly through. It's very, steamy, but it's also really beautiful reflection on like family and faith and discovering oneself amidst, these external forces that we cannot help, really, how you find yourself and make peace with yourself. It's a really, really gorgeous book. I loved it. Question number 8, newest fictional crush. I really don't have one, so I'm going to skip this one. I don't really read a lot of books where like that is an intention or like something that would happen for me, really. So yeah, I have to skip that one. Question number 9, newest favorite character. For this one, I'm gonna have to go with Katharina Kepler, who is the main character in Everyone Knows, oh, sorry for the glare. Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Galchen. This one just came out this month, and it basically is a historical fiction novel. It's based on a real event. So we follow this woman who has been accused of being a witch in the 1600s in Germany. So this is partly a true story, and you kind of see her grappling with this accusation and kind of awaiting the pending trial in which it's determined whether she is a witch. I think this book it's so darkly comedic, despite it looking at this very, bleak circumstance that we find this character in, but she is illiterate, and so she's telling her story to her neighbor who has opted to help her out, basically. The story is mostly told from her perspective, but we also see the neighbor's perspective, and you kind of see the events leading up to the trial and everything. And so I really like this book. I really felt for Katharina, and I think she is funny, and I just liked her perspective, and it was just a really interesting way of reading a story in terms of hearing her tell her own story and try to find happiness despite this, bleak circumstance she's found herself in. I really like this as a character study, and yeah, it was just a fun read. I liked it. Question number 10, a book that made you cry. I have 2 for this one. Neither of them made me cry, but I got very close. The first one is Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. This is a multi-generational familial drama looking at a family that is fragmented by immigration. So you follow this family that is constantly split between Colombia and the United States, and you see the fraught relationships that ensue in the familial context due to immigration and kind of the pointlessness that often comes with immigration policy and the ways that it can really harm a family. And you look at all these different characters and the ways that this is impacting them, and I just thought it was so gorgeous and insane how well plotted this book is. It is so wild to me that this book is less than 200 pages, but it feels like you went on a huge, tumultuous journey with this family. So yeah, I think this is a masterpiece in terms of plotting, in terms of getting a full familial drama in this tiny, compact little book. Ending, there's this one scene in particular where I almost cried, but I held it together. It's very hard for a book to make me cry, so this one got close. And the next one is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. This is another very online internet book that's fragmented, and I think it worked really well, unlike the Jenny Awful book that I read. So this one, we follow a narrator who has become internet famous due to some tweets. She is funny. So the first half of the novel is basically, it feels like Twitter. You're looking at these different fragments, different information being thrown at you. It's often hilarious. And then the second part of the book, our narrator is kind of pulled out of the portal, she calls it, when a familial tragedy strikes. The way that the second section pulls everything together in terms of kind of grounding the narrative was just insanely moving. I almost cried, and I watched this interview with Gia Tolentino and Patricia Lockwood, in which she talks a bit more about the situation that she covers in this book, and that made me cry. Yeah, this is an amazing book. I really liked it. It's so different and weird and new and fresh, and I loved it. So if you like internet novels, this is another one to definitely try. Question number 11, a book that made you happy. If you follow my channel at all, you know that I don't really read happy books whatsoever. I'll give a quick answer for this. The George Saunders book that I talked about at the beginning of this video, I adore it so much, and it made me so happy. It made me excited to read, and so that's one of the rare instances of a book making me happy, so I'll give that recommendation again. It's so good. Question number 12, most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. Again, I have 2 for this one. So the first one is a YA book, which I didn't really realize when I picked this one up, that it was YA. I never really read YA, but this one is so cool. So this is the cover. It's called Yoke by Mary H.K. Choi. So really pretty yellow cover. Has my microphone been in the frame this entire time? And then you turn it and the hands are connecting. Is that not cool? I thought it was awesome. So yeah, that one's gorge. And then, okay, hi, my camera just died and I cannot be asked to charge it and start filming again, so I'm on my phone. Okay, so the other pretty book that I have is called Like a Bird, and it's from this cool small publisher called Unnamed Press. They publish these really gorgeous hardbacks, so I don't know if you can tell, but it's so silky smooth, and I always like to read my hardcovers without the dust jacket on. So yeah, I love that. And then they have really pretty end paper, so it's the smooth white minimal hardback that's a pleasure to hold in the hand. So check out Unnamed Press. They have some really good titles as well, and you get a really pretty book as well. So the last question, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I am a huge mood reader, and I don't really have anything that I must read this year besides one, and that is the Sally Rooney book. The moment I get that book in my hand, everything else is dropped. I'll be doing a vlog, like it's gonna be a moment. So I'm very excited for that. I cannot wait. Oh my god. Oh, see, that about does it for the tag. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you, if you pick up any of these books that I recommended, I hope you love them, like I do. Well, most of them anyway. But yeah, so until next time, cheers.